In a previous movie, you can find a link in the notes of this video. I showed you how you can create a JavaFX user interface to interact with the OpenAI ChatGPT based system and ask questions. Now in this movie, I want to extend that example and chat with an existing documentation set. Part of my job is keeping the documentation of Azul up to date and also add new release notes and extra information and user guides, all that kind of stuff. So we have the Azul website with the documentation, docs.azul.com, and on this website we have a search box. This search box is using the Algolia system behind the scenes, but what's important here is that we already have an existing dataset, a JSON format, with all the pieces of our documentation in a structured format, which is very handy if you want to experiment, like for instance with a chat-based system, and use this existing documentation set as a source for this chat system to provide you with answers. The project that I'm showing you now is available on GitHub, so you can also experiment with it yourself. It's on my F. Del Porte GitHub account, and it's called LangChain4j JavaFX Docs Chat. So this is the full project, and within this within this example, you will also find a small part of the JSON that I use in the full example, but you can generate this own format for yourself or adapt the code to align with an existing structured data set that you have yourself. So let's look at the code. So here on my side in the code, I have this full JSON data file. It has per header item of a page, it has an URL, a direct link to the anchor of the title of that part of the page, and then the full content, the text, which is on this web page. And how I do this within this application, for your reference, this is based on the JavaFX example that I created for the LangChain4j project. So check the previous movie or also check the source code of that project. So here I extended the answer service, and it's now a docs answer service. And when it starts, when the application starts, gets initialized, it will parse this JSON data. So it will load all these elements of documentation that we have in that JSON. So it's called a content section here. So let's see what's in there. It has an URL, it has a direct link with an anchor, and it has the content, which are the most important parts which are used in this application. So this whole JSON is loaded into a list with all these sections, and that's what is being used by the application to find a relevant pages with documentation related to the question that's being asked. So when we now initialize the chat application, it will create an embedding model with an in-memory embedding store. So what's actually happening here is that a vector database gets created behind the scene. I'm definitely not a specialist in artificial intelligence and machine learning and large language models, so I really found out how to use this based on the existing examples in the LangChain4j project, also with some help from my friends, of course. But what happens is that this whole data model, this JSON file with existing documentation, gets converted into a vector database. And when you ask a new question, it can compare that question with the existing vectors to find back the elements of the documentation which match the question being asked, and then it can generate an answer out of it. So this needs to happen once when the application starts, and it also takes some time. And if we then ask a question, what happens here is that the embedding store can be called to find the relevant sections related to the question that's asked. So in the embedding store, we say find relevant, we give it the question, we say how many results it should turn back and which score. So these are two values that you can play with if you don't get the relevant answers or are not really happy with the results. And then we log something about how many of these elements were found. And then we actually create a text for our chat system to give it all the relevant information so it can come up with a matching reply. So I have two different templates here. So if no relevant embeddings were found, if the documentation which is used as the basis doesn't contain anything related to the question, we ask the system to reply with something like, sorry, I didn't find anything. And if relevant embeddings are found, then we give the system the question, also which information is available in the documentation, all the relevant parts are returned here, and then we say come up with a decent answer. Now let's start the application and see what happens. So as you can see, the JSON contains 1541 sections. So that's not the number of pages, but that's the number of headers on all the pages and then with the content below it. Actually, there seems to be one empty. There are 1540 text segments which are loaded from the JSON, converted to a Java object, and which are now being used by this model to create vectors. We have to wait a little bit. You can see that it's not finished yet, so this takes some time. And it now has the same amount of embeddings, and the embeddings are added to the store, so everything, the chat model, is ready to be used. So if we now ask a question about the products which are available, provided by Azul, what is Azul Prime? You see that it shows a list of all the pages which were most relevant. So the Prime getting started is the most relevant page, and then the other ones. So if you would build some kind of extended user interface on top of this, we would be able to give links to all these sections of the documentation of Azul. And then it comes up with an answer. Azul Platform Prime is a modern TCK compliant Java platform, which is absolutely correct. It has many benefits, like for instance, it's the pauseless garbage collector. You can run it on different systems. You can use it Dockerized. It has intelligence cloud. So a lot of information is correctly summarized here based on all this information. How do I install Azul Zulu on macOS? You see that here install macOS is also again one of the top answers, and it gives you the installation process with the DMG, which is again the correct approach. And you can also do this from a zip file. So again, it's showing us the correct information. It has links to where this can be found. So we could really show this in an easy to use way and click through all the pages. So this system is really capable of answering two questions which are related to the documentation. And the main advantage is because we give it the whole data set of the last up-to-date documentation of Azul, it's really looking into this. So we don't rely on the model, which on all the data which was used to train the model, which can be old, like for instance ChatGPT 3.5, I think is already almost 2 years old. So these answers are really the latest documentation set of Azul being used, and not the most of the time outdated information which is within the ChatGPT system. So this is a nice way. It's one of the many examples you will find nowadays about documentation and chatting with your documentation. There's also a Vaden example available. There are a lot of other people investigating how to achieve this. I wanted to show you one approach, which is using JavaFX, because that's my preferred way to build a user interface, and show you that you can really interact with an existing documentation set.